Welcome to today's CV TechCast. This is going to be a very cool session today. We're going to talk about sinks and sink cutouts. And some of the features covered in this video may only apply to or be available with Solid Advanced or higher, or they may actually be specific to the Solid Tops add-on. Before we begin, there are several things that we need to understand about cutouts. The screen that we're looking at here is the object properties from a sink object. So basically, if you right-click on a sink object, go to Properties, you'll see this Cutout tab. Now this Cutout tab gives you three options. Number one, if you uncheck Create Cutout, then you just won't have a cutout at all. Now, if you choose automatic, which is what we have on the left-hand side, you'll see that all of the values are grayed out. So there's no way to control any information about that cutout. In fact, the cutout for when it's set to automatic is entirely based on the shape of the sink. Okay, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, and that can be a problem, and it depends on what your expectations are. Now on the right-hand side of the screen, we have it set to CNC. Now when we have it set to CNC, you could tell it to trim off an amount all the way around that top. So for example, the back, front, left, and right, we're taking off 1 inch or 25.4 millimeters. You can also see that the corner can be set to a straight corner or rounded with a radius, or a chamfer with a value that you may enter in for the chamfer. So next we will discuss saving a 3D sink object. These are things that we must understand. So first of all, what we see on the screen here is on the left, we see Save Object Advanced Properties. And the vertical placement here is the main thing that we need to understand is if it's a sink or a cooktop, then you want to specify that it should be placed at the countertop. Now what this does is when you pull it out of your library, you will already have a cabinet in the room and you will already have a countertop. Then this object will go right on top of the countertop. Now if those are not in, then if you don't have a cabinet or if you don't have a countertop, then it will be placed at what the estimated cabinet height is based on room properties. Now on the middle of the screen, we see the perimeter edit menu. Now we're going to go through an example of how to do this, but I want to cover it here. This is when you right-click on the sink object and you go to Properties. You would go to the Perimeters tab and create a new perimeter called _ELEADJ. And the value that you enter here would be the distance from the bottom of the sink to the bottom of the lip, where you want it to connect to the surface of the countertop. So you can see that on the right, 182.563. That is the distance from the bottom of the sink to the bottom of the lip on that sink. That's the value that I put in here with a negative. Okay, so just so you understand, once you put this value in, or this perimeter, you have to save this object back to your library, and then the next time you use it, it will automatically reposition that sink into the countertop. Another thing that I would like to point out, if you do, for example, an undermount countertop. With an undermount countertop, you would use the exact same thing, with the exception you would have an additional amount that represents the thickness of that countertop, or where you want this to be. Okay, so as we continue, I'm going to go through a few screens here, and then we're going to actually recreate some of this on the fly. And the reason why I'm doing this is this will be easier to kind of capture it all in one screen so that you can see what we're what we're looking at. Now, in addition to sink and cooktop objects creating a cutout, you can actually right-click on a top and choose Add Cutout. And you'll see the little screen pop up where it says Countertop Cutout. You would specify the distance from the left end of the top to the cutout center, distance from the back of the top to the cutout center, and then you would specify the width and depth of the cutout. And this is when you're in countertop mode, you can edit the countertop. And again, when you're in countertop mode, if you need to edit the shape of that cutout, once you have a cutout in place, you can right-click in that area where the cutout is, choose Edit Cutout Shape, and that will bring up the CAD Edit or Shape Editor tools. And finally, if you have a countertop cutout that you need to delete, you would right-click on that cutout, go to Properties, and then on the Cutouts tab, you would choose the cutout that you want to remove, and then you would click the Remove button. Okay, so now we're in a job and we're looking at room number 1 with a standard sink, and there's nothing in here. I do have an empty base object which I could use to define the countertop itself. So I wanted to avoid putting a cabinet object in the room because all we want to see is the behavior between the countertop and the sink. So if I go to the Objects menu, and in my Appliance catalog, I have a sinks category, you'll see that the tech videos is one that I've created just for today, but the rest of these are usually included with the installation of Cabinet Vision Solid. So for example, you'll see we have a range of standard and then standard 3D. So for example, a standard is just going to be a flat piece that is going to sit right on top of the countertop. And let's go to a wireframe mode. When it's in wireframe mode, you can see the detail of the cutout below that sink. Now, if I go to change my layer schedule where I have the sinks turned off, we can see just the cutout only. Okay, it's important here to understand that if this cutout or if this sink, let's go to Properties on it, if it is set to do an automatic cutout, then that cutout is going to be exactly the same size as that sink. And if you did that, then that sink would actually fall through. It would not have nothing to support it in there. Now, this might be appropriate for an undermount sink, but certainly not something like this. Okay, so something else I want to point out is sink objects are just like cabinets. So for example, when this got placed in the room, it went all the way back to the wall. So if you need a little space there, just click on your sink and come over here to the outset and enter in a value for how much that you want that outset to be. And the cutout moves with it. So that's a regular flat sink. Okay, so let's move to room number 2. And this is basically a copy of the room that we already had. And what we'll do is we'll come to down here on the favorites bar. I've already created a sink that we're going to use for this video. And when I bring the sink in, we know, for example, let's zoom in, you can see the wall is 2200 millimeters. So that means that I can place this sink here by typing in the center position. And so our sink comes in. And let's go ahead and delete that empty base cabinet. Now this is a sink that I brought in, and I did not compensate for the placement of the sink. So what we're going to do is we'll walk through that right now. We need this sink to automatically position a little bit lower than it is. So we're going to use the measure tool. We're going to measure from the bottom of the lip of the sink where we want it to connect to the surface of the top. So that value here is minus 182.563. Let's go ahead and cut that using the Windows clipboard. And now I could right click on the sink and go to properties. Go to parameters. I'm going to add a new parameter. And we'll give it a value using the value that I copied from that. Now once we do this, it does not automatically make the adjustment. So what we'll do is save it back to the library. And this will give me an opportunity real quickly to show you that when saving a sink object, we need to specify appliance, and in the type we need to specify sink, and most importantly we need to tell it that it's going to be at the countertop. You always have to have horizontal checked for either the wall or the corner for any object you save in the library. So we'll click OK, and we'll delete this, and we'll come back and bring it in again. Now this time it goes exactly where we need it. And again, it's not going to be exactly right because you can see that it's all the way up against the wall. Most people don't actually do these like that, so let's give it a outset. I'm just going to put in 60 millimeters. And this one, by the way, I had already saved it so that it has the CNC cutout option, because you can kind of see it when you look here at the 3D view. We zoom in, you can see the cutout is inside of the shape of the sink, so it's inside of the boundary of that sink. If we turn off my layer here, we can see the cutout is a little bit smaller. Okay, and so let's right click on that, and we'll just take a look at that real quickly. Here's the cutout. I've set it to CNC. I want 1 inch all the way around, or 25.4 millimeters, and I want the corner to be round, 25.4. So let's do a photo vision render on that. I just want to take a good look at that. It's actually a really nice sink. It's got a really nice faucet. Everything looks very good on that. So next we'll move on to room number 3. Now in room number 3, I've already put in a farm sink, and there were a few steps that I had to go through in order to get this in place. Let's first look at what it looks like when it's completed. Okay, so we have the shape of the cutout closely follows the actual shape of this sink, and it also, the shape ends right here at the front. Now there were several steps that I had to go through to get that, and one of them, when I click on the sink object, you can actually see it right here that the outset is 150 millimeters, and that shows that this dotted line is here, and you can see the dotted line comes all the way to the very front. Now if this was anything greater than 150, let's make it 155, and we'll go to the 3D view, and when we render that, you'll see that we lose the cutout. Okay, so what's going on here is if the object, the sink object or cooktop, whatever you're using, if it extends past the edge of the top, then you're going to lose the cutout. So we've got a way to compensate for that. Let's go ahead and move it back to 150. Now the reason why I'm using 150 is that it's right on the edge, and that prevents the cutout from getting lost. Let's just use fill mode render on that. Okay, so let's go through the steps that I have to go through to make this work. Let's go ahead and delete the butler sink, and I'm going to delete this cabinet. I've got a cabinet in that space. It's actually an empty object, and traditionally what you would do, you would put in a cabinet the size that you needed, and then There's a couple of ways to do it, and I want to discuss that real quickly. You can see here that I've got a space between the two cabinets which is equal to the width of the butler sink or farm sink. And the cabinet that goes in between would be that size. It would be 900 millimeters, however wide this is, but it would also be 300 millimeters shorter at the top to allow for the butler sink to fit in that space. But if we do that and we auto build our countertop, then the countertop will only put a top on either side. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, go back to this, and I went ahead and undid that so that we get this cabinet back in. You can see that I've already set it to be shorter. What I'll do here is take that cabinet plus 300 millimeters to the top of it again. We'll bring it back up to that size. And at this point, if I go to auto build my tops, we're going to get one big top the way we want it. That's what we want. Now, after putting the top in, the easiest way to accomplish this would be to actually reduce the height of this item by 300 millimeters. And by doing that, when I come down here and I grab the butler sink or farm sink, it will allow me to position it in reference to the cabinet on either side. So you can see I use the clearance value here to get it in the right spot. Okay, so that's important. And when we come in and look, you can see the butler sink, farm sink is all the way to the back. It's touching the wall. And it's not actually creating the type of effect that we need here at the front. So remember, the value that I had for the outset was 150. Now that's simply the depth of the top minus the depth of the unit itself. So that comes out to 150. That's not a magic number or anything like that. So if we go to look at the 3D view here, you can see the cutout occurs, but because the cutout is right at the edge and its radius right at the edge, then it's going to create an inaccurate scenario. Now, typically, a farm sink is going to extend beyond the edge of the countertops. Let's go and see what we can do. We'll take this butler sink, and I brought it up here to the assembly level. So just in case I went too fast, let's go back, right-click on that butler sink, choose Edit. That's the same thing. And this is what we're at, is the assembly level. We're looking at just the sink itself. Now, if we go to the end view, and we click on the sink, which is part name porcelain, I'm going to move the in and out. So what we're doing here is we're actually pushing the object out 50 millimeters. And that's going to give us what we want here. But there's something we need to consider. You can see that the gap back here for the cutout is incorrect, and the cutout at the front is also incorrect. But we've got a really cool way to overcome that. We'll right-click on the sink, go to Properties, go to Cutout, and we would tell it to trim 50 millimeters off the back. And we would tell it to trim minus 50 millimeters off the front. And now when we go to look at this, this is the result. So we've got the effect that we need for this. Now, if this was actually a legitimate farm sink object, that you actually order this farm sink from a supplier, and you knew exactly what the radius was, you could easily set this up so that it will render properly, but that it will also produce the accurate machining for that. Pretty cool. All right, so, and again, traditionally there'd be a cabinet on either side of it. There'd be a cabinet underneath of it, so that would be the end result. In fact, if we look at this item here, I already had a sample of the same thing right here with cabinets. So now we'll move on. Let's go back to the plan view, And let's go to room number 4. Now this is the countertop cutout room. Now this one here, we're not going to use a sink. In fact, let's just delete the cabinet. All we have in here is the top. And this is the example that I mentioned in the presentation. We'll go to tops mode. We'll right click on the top and we'll choose add cutout. And let's say from the left end, that's going to be from the left end of that. So we're going to just leave it where it is. And the width and all of these, we'll just leave them where they are. So there's our cutout. And that's actually a valid, good cutout that you could use for CNC. And we go back to tops and we can right click on the cutout. We can choose edit cutout shape. And so, for example, I may use the join tool to give it a radius on all 4 corners. And if I need additional cutouts, I can right click on it and choose add cutout, add another cutout. And let's say this one, we want it to be 120. Actually, we need to make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's make it 250 from the end. And we'll leave it at center from the back. We'll make it, if we make it 100 millimeters, that'll be 4. So let's just go ahead and go with about 150 millimeters. We'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see that cutout. So we can add additional multiple cutouts to the top. If we go back to tops and right click, we could go to properties, and on the cutouts tab, we can highlight either of the cutouts and then remove them. Okay, so there's just one final minor thing that I want to show. Now, if you remember, I was discussing that the cutout shape is defined by the sink object itself. Let's go ahead and go to tops and we'll delete that other cutout that we don't need. Okay, so let's just look at this. The cutout that we see here with that sink is exactly the size and shape of that object. Now, let's delete that. I've got a really cool little thing that I created here. It's a star shape. Let's go ahead and set the outset for that to 150 millimeters. And you can see it created that cutout. And if we render that, we'll get an idea of what it's going to look like. So we've got that shape. And what's really cool about this is if I go to the S-Trim Center, and it should be Cadmium for countertop surface. Let's hope that this is the right one. Let's right click on it, choose edit. So there's our star shape. Let's go to edit operations, click on that. And I want to change that to a pocket. And I want to change the depth of the cut to 3 millimeters. And for the tool, I actually want to use a very small tool. So what do we have? I've got a 1/8 inch bit. And so we can exit out of here and then optimize that. So we can see our star shape. Now, if we run show toolpath, it'll show you what's going to happen here. But what's really cool in version 10 with S2M10 is the machining simulation. So when we open that, it's going to pop up down here on the taskbar, the AlphaCam window. And you can see that it's already doing the little pocket operation 3 millimeters deep for that star. Let's go ahead and speed it up a little bit. And to be honest with you, for me, that's pretty darn cool. So that's it for today's webinar, and I hope that you found it useful.
This completes today's training movie. I would like to remind you of your training options. The help files are available within each Cabinet Vision product. The eSupport technical website is a great resource for questions and answers, and it features a technician monitored forum. Regional training classes are available, so please contact your customer service rep for classes in your area. If you would like someone to come on site and train your team and yourself, this can be arranged. Online training is a convenient method for training over the internet. The e-learning series is a series of topics you can purchase online for immediate download and use. If you have questions about this or anything else, please go to our website, cabinetvision.com. We look forward to you joining us next time. Thank you for watching.